Hello. Cannes is always an important occasion for the Thai film industry. Thai films have featured many times in the festival, even taking home the Palme d'Or. Thai companies bring their films to the Marche, and at the International Village, visitors can find out about the work of the Ministry of Culture and discover all the benefits of filming in Thailand. Unfortunately, this year, COVID prevents us from being there in person, but Thailand is still very much open for business. Today, Thailand's Ministry of Culture would like to welcome you to this special session. We'll learn a bit more about how you can bring your films to shoot in Thailand. We'll learn how the incentives offered are more attractive than ever. And we'll find out how Thailand offers excellent opportunities for co-production. Firstly, let's meet two guests who can tell us about Thailand as an international destination for production. Today, I'd like to welcome Mr. Anand Wongbencharat, the Director General of the Department of Tourism. The Department of Tourism is the body which governs and directs strategy and policy for the production services industry, as well as operating the Thailand Film Office. And we welcome Apinat Op Siricharanjit, Partner and Production Manager of Living Films. Living Films has been one of the fastest growing production services companies in Thailand during the last decade, facilitating The Hangover Part 2, No Escape, Gold, and Tremors Shrika Island. My first question to you both is, why do you think Thailand has become such a popular destination for international films? The number of productions has risen steadily, and in 2019, the number of feature films was up by 20%. Mr. Anand, what is it that particularly attracts international production?
As you know, that Thailand has very diversified and variety of good attraction scenery, and we also can be develop any location in the world, and together with our service mind and professional crews, we have also a very good facility and studio and technologies. We have very high-speed internet and good transportation and all type of accommodation, logistic, and restaurant, and everything that filmmaker all around the world like to be here.
Tell me, is what Mr. Anand said right? Do you agree with him? Is that why people are coming to Thailand and shoot here?
Of course. Mainly, in recent, past years, Thailand has been the host of, more and more big productions that would like to, take advantage of whatever Mr. Anand has rightly said. And also, it's not just that. I mean, I can proudly say that, we have one of the best crew in Asia at the moment. We're really fast, really efficient, and we are also really skilled. And also, we increasingly growing in the equipment wise as well. We've been, in recent, for example, I just Living Film just did a big production for Marvel Studios, and we ended up nearly supplying everything that they need equipment wise. And of course, the Thai hospitality has been, second to none in the world. We welcome everybody with a smile. We are really friendly. And on the creative side, I must say that we've been growing really strongly as well. A lot of production now employs our own our Thai production designers and art directors as well, and more importantly, we are competitively in budget wise as well.
Look, I think again you made some very interesting points, advantages that Thailand has that some other countries maybe don't have. Certainly the breadth of equipment and modern equipment, but also the fact that very often, when you go to certain countries, you might have to take in all your main crew, and then you rely on a fixer. Whereas in Thailand, I think we're increasingly seeing a level of skill that can take up, key creative posts. Anyway, I mean, look, things were looking great, weren't they? Record numbers of productions, record amount of revenue. And I think we all hoped as 2020 began that we had every expectation that it was going to be another record year for the production services industry of Thailand. None of us knew what was around the corner. Which of course was COVID-19, and of course in Thailand for at least a short period there were curfews. It was impossible to bring people into the country, and as a result, pretty much every production cancelled or postponed. Mr. Anand, that must have been a pretty desperate time. How did you respond to these desperate times?
We quickly consult with the public health and other authority concerned to make the film industry go on. And we have set up the rule and regulation for filming in Thailand, and also the code for the Thai coordinator and workers to work with the international production.
It's certainly true that that Thailand was one of the first countries to create a proper set of regulations to enable filming to return. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a follow-up question, Mr. Anand, because I suspect that must have been a very difficult task, because obviously the prime importance was to keep not only Thailand safe and the people of Thailand safe, but also to protect and keep safe our visitors, the film crews coming in. But at the same time, of course, they have to maintain efficiency and be able to film scenes with crowds or people kissing and things like that. Was it a tricky task? Did you have to consult with a lot of different companies and medical authorities to work out these regulations?
Oh yes, we did. And by the way, this instruction has come from the public health department, of course, because they control the situation of the COVID-19 spread. And by the way, at the site or the shooting site, we have local administration take control, and we have some people from our department to watch and see. We arrange the shooting site into 3 sections.
You had a big production here recently. So tell me, I suppose my question is, how did it work? Obviously, these rules are designed to keep people safe. And as Mr. Anand said, they seem to have been remarkably successful at doing that. How did production go? How did it work for you?
Like you said before, that, although we need efficiency and there's a lot of scenes that need to be filmed with a lot of people, but our main goal is that to keep everybody safe from COVID. So I can say briefly that, usually in a production, we need to separate people into zones, and each zone is actually their own bubble. So every time, if there is a positive case, then there's a prevention measures so that the whole production doesn't get held up.
The biggest question is, I'm trying to guess what production you're talking about, and looking at your T-shirt, I wonder if I can guess from the T-shirt you're wearing. But anyway, I mean, the big question is the productions you've been working on. Did you manage to complete filming? Did you complete on schedule? Did it work? Did the productions finish and complete and shoot what they wanted to when they needed to?
Yes, it has been proven because we have complete everything that were set out to achieve in Thailand.
So you had happy clients.
Yes, they were really happy.
Excellent. That's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that has certainly helped in recent years in attracting productions to Thailand has been the incentive measures. They're still relatively new in Thailand, but I think even in the fairly short time we've had incentive measures, they've been very constructive in bringing productions to Thailand. I'd like to ask Mr. Anand, what is the government's commitment to the incentive? Do you think it's worked? Secondly, is it going to continue? And thirdly, is there any way that it can be sweetened at all in these tricky times?
Yeah. As you said, Paul, it's very new measure or new way to attract all the film production around the world. And I should say that the rebate had been paid on time and with the very quick and transparent.
I remember speaking to one of the producers who had filmed in many different countries, and he said that this was the smoothest, fastest, and easiest process he had ever come across in the world. So just to reinforce what you're saying, that we really hear this from people.
I'm very confident, and I'm sure that everyone that already had been received this rebate is enjoyed and ask whether we can give more. Anyway, in this situation, we would like to welcome more filmmaker to come to Thailand. So we propose to the government that it should be a new kind of rebate added to the one that we had been used for 3 years. Now we can get more rebate if you want to filming in Thailand, and we would like to tell you that after 15% that we used for 3 years, now you can get 5% more to up to 20% by filming in Thailand until December 2022 or December next year. And with the investment of more than 100 million baht or around $3 million, you can get 5% more.
So basically, in the past, productions, there's been a base incentive of 15%.
Yeah.
And as I understand it now, if productions are spending $3 million or more, that base just automatically goes up to 20% that they can apply for.
This is a very good time for big production.
I'm going to turn the question over to Op here. So tell me, I mean, there are lots of questions. How do you think incentives have helped in the past to attract productions here? How important are they? And do you think that there are productions who will be further encouraged to come here by the fact that there's now, as we've just heard, a scoop here, an extra 5% for them? What are your thoughts?
Definitely, I think in the current market and situation and all that, an incentive is actually an essential part of the decision making for all the producers around the world. I mean, like, I had a couple of years ago, I had a talk with one of the location manager from the Pirates of the Caribbean, who has, like, an idea before that he wants to shoot here in Thailand, but then the producers actually asked, this was like 5-6 years ago, and then the producers asked if there was an incentive in Thailand, and they said no, and then sometimes they wouldn't even consider that in the current situation, and so I think the incentive is actually an essential part at the moment, and it's like a marketing tool for to open up the country. As we all know that the bigger the incentive, the bigger the productions it attracts at the moment. And also, I really wanted to say that our incentive program, although it hasn't gone up to like other countries, but it's actually tailor-made and specific. When the film office actually making the incentive program, it was not just made by the people who run the countries. It's actually being made by the people who actually knows production. So every single minor detail is actually made with the understanding of the film industry.
Well, look, I think the message is a very clear one, which is that the Department of Tourism and the Thai Film Office is constantly working with the production services industry, listening to their needs, and proactively responding, and responding very, very quickly, as we've seen with the COVID regulations. I have to wrap it up, but it's been a wonderful session. If I may, to sum up, it seems to me that our message from today is that Thailand is open for the film business, that even through these very tough times, we've had productions coming here to film, filming successfully, filming on schedule, and with limited setbacks, with no risk to the main actors and crew from COVID. And not only that we are sweetening the deal on incentives by adding another potential 5% to qualifying productions. And I believe that there are currently productions currently in pre-production, planning to come. Am I right, Kun Op? You're looking forward to more productions coming soon?
Yes, we actually have one production prepping right now, and we have a couple more coming towards the end of the year.
Well, that's a very good way to end. Good news, more productions coming.
Good to hear that. So, good to hear that.
So it only remains for me to thank you very much to our guests, who I think have very well summed up the current situation and what we're going to be doing in the future. So thank you very much to Mr. Anand and to Mr. Op for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Sawadee krap.
Thailand has always supported a strong local film industry, but it's perhaps true that in the past, the local film industry and the international production services industry were largely separated. Now, in recent years, we've seen an increasing number of international co-productions. And with these, the local creative skills, the logistical skills, the technical skills can be combined. Now, my next two guests are both highly involved in Thai co-productions. I would like to introduce Mr. Kultape Narula, President of the Foreign Film Production Services Association, Thailand, and COO of Benetton Films. And we have Mark Boot, the Managing Director of Consolidated Media Holdings, Thailand. Hi, Mark. Thank you both for joining us today. I'd like to start with Kultape. Now, Benetton has been one of the busiest production service companies in Thailand for a number of years. You've produced thousands of hours of films, of television programs, of commercials, but you've also been very actively involved in your own productions and co-productions. Tell me about those productions and why did you decide to create your own content?
Sure. Our company's been around for about 20 years. And like you said, we started off as a production services company. And we've been working with a lot of international productions over the years. I think the reason our company decided to take the next step into producing original content is the fundamental shift in the market. And I think I could say in a way the internationalization of Thai content, the presence of the OTT platforms that have come into the market, the consumption behavior of the people in Thailand and in the region, mixed with the quality of content that's coming out of Thailand, just made it right for us to want to take the step into producing original content. And I think going back to my point, I think the market has changed, and I think there's a lot of very big opportunities out there for us to grab.
Would you say that perhaps your experience in production services, is it fair to say that might be a way of sort of cutting your teeth, of getting that experience before creating your own content?
I mean, that's certainly helped us, and I think that's been reconsidered as a winning strategy. That the ability that we have, or the knowledge that we have gained over the years of working with foreign production, has given us a different perspective in producing the content. Even though we are right now primarily producing content in Thailand and in India, but the Thai content that we're producing right now, we are coming up with a different flavor, if I can put it that way, to the local content that's widely available here. And I think what we're trying to do is just sprinkle in that whole international feel to it. It's still content meant primarily for Thai audience, but at the same time, I think there's an international appeal to it. Having worked with international productions over the year, having dealt with a lot of people from outside of Thailand, it's given us a perspective of what the nuances of different cultures. And I think we are trying to incorporate that. And every time we write a script or we develop a new content, we always ask our team and ask ourselves, how is this content going to appeal to audience in Indonesia? How is it going to appeal to audiences in Singapore? Without losing its essence, its core essence, we try to see if we can mix in, different flavors to it so that it appeals to a larger audience.
Now, I'm going to turn to Mark. Your background is slightly different. Your background comes from the world of distribution and sales. Can you tell me how you got involved in financing and in co-production and in Thailand?
Well, I think a lot of what Kun Kultep said is very valid. Thai content, there is a demand for it now. I'm working with Soraya Film. I'm the buyer for Soraya. We're the big buyer for Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Philippines for all Thai content. So there's one company in particular in Thailand called GDH, and they really opened the door for distributing Thai content to other countries. And once people saw how Bad Genius did and some of these other great movies that they've made, it becomes much more interesting for people from China or different territories where they have some demand and for Thai actors to get involved and to be the key, I think, and what Mr. Kultep also said is that you have to keep it, if you're going to make Thai content for Thai people, you really have to keep it Thai. So you have to Thai people don't really go for the hybrid where you have 2 Chinese actors and 2 Thai actors. So you have to kind of either come in all international and make the film for the Japanese or the Chinese or whoever and use their actors and bring in the whole thing, or make it for Thailand and then be able to export it also. So I think it's a very delicate balance, but right now there is a tremendous amount of demand for Thai content. And the other thing that's happened recently is that obviously China, there's a little bit of a vacuum in terms of China for foreign product, because outside of Marvel, they're really not the censors and the people in control of the China Film Group are not allowing films in from the USA. They're not allowing films in from Canada because of a different situation there, and they're not allowing films in from the UK. But Chinese people have a great demand for foreign language and foreign films. So right now, I just made a big production in Thailand with two of the biggest stars that was completely co-produced and completely financed by the Chinese. And before that, I was involved in a movie called The Lake, which is also completely financed by the Chinese. And now I'm making one with a Swiss guy. But it's also the focus is to make it for Thailand, but also have the big distribution in China, in Malaysia, and all these different territories. So what I think has really changed in Thailand is the ability to monetize Thai product outside of just Thailand. And the other thing that actually your previous guest alluded to from Living Film is that Thailand really has the infrastructure. What people don't realize is that all these Japanese commercials from like the 1950s till now are made in Thailand. So all the Suntory ads, everything that they make, those Japanese commercials were all made. So that led to a huge infrastructure here. So if you go to a Gearhead, which is the rental agency, you have 3 football fields full of lighting and grips, and there's a full contingent of highly qualified technicians in Thailand, and so it makes it much easier to shoot here. And you have credible people and credible companies like Beltone, like Living Film, that they're bondable. Basically, the completion bond will say, okay, if they're saying it can be done for this, we'll agree with it, and that way you can bank the paper, you can collateralize distribution contracts, and you can legitimately monetize it and monetize the production. So I think that's really important that they have such a great infrastructure for film here, and that you have companies that are credible. I mean, if you go to Cambodia or you go to Myanmar, you're going to want to actually take Benetton or Living Film. They don't have that kind of infrastructure. So that makes a really big difference. For me, there's those two things. It's the ability to monetize and the ability to produce here at a very high level with the top equipment and top technicians.
Right. Cool tape. I think this word co-production, we hear it all the time. There are co-production markets, co-production forums. I think in the past there was perhaps sometimes a misunderstanding that we go out, we say we want to find co-production. What we really mean is we want to make the film our way with our script. Our actors just give us money. How often does that happen? And how often does a co-production really have to share some of the casting and creative decisions? Tell me what you think the ideal co-production model is.
I'll talk specifically in terms of Thailand, right?
Yeah.
And how it is here. I think the word co-production in Thailand, when you talk to different, not only ourselves, but people in the industry, I think you got to differentiate between government-to-government co-productions, and then there's the business-to-business co-production side. So let me talk a little bit about the business-to-business side, right? I think the word co-production, again, is evolving. I would say it that way. It's evolving. I think earlier, like you mentioned, people would just say, hey, listen, I have a project, I have a script, I have a director, I have this. It's a Thai film. Now I'm looking for money, right? And then that would become a little bit more challenging in terms of raising the funding, because 5 years ago or 3 years ago, 5 years ago, or 7 years ago, Thai movie was slightly more limited in terms of distribution. So it was harder to raise those kind of money. We would get projects that are more art house, that are, the festival sweethearts that and they're great movies, but they were sort of in that category. But now I think the commercial projects, both in terms of films and series, is gaining traction. I think, like what Mark mentioned, you have all these foreign funds, foreign producers that are now looking for opportunities, right, to expand beyond their own borders. And then Thailand's infrastructure, Thailand's creative availability of talents and actors make it interesting for foreign entities who want to do what we call a co-production with Thai companies. And I think that is the market that's evolving right now. I think what is happening and what we're seeing, especially with our company at the moment, is we are talking to funds that are outside of Thailand and saying, guys, we have this project. Would you want to get into a co-investment with us? Which means what? I mean, we also have to put in the money, obviously. So we become part producer, they become part producer. We get together and we do a co-production. So I think that certainly I see it growing. I see Thai companies now wanting to reach out to foreign companies. I see foreign companies wanting to come to Thailand. There are funds available now both in Thailand and Singapore, for example, and even the funds in Singapore are now looking at Thai content to see how they can get involved. So I think a lot of that is cooking at the moment, and it's great for the industry. Very exciting.
Excellent. Mark, I think let's go back about 10 years ago when Thai companies were looking for financing, co-production. The natural place for them to want to go was Hollywood, the home of film, the American dollar. Give us your money. But I think in recent years, that focus seems to have changed. Do you think there's been a sort of a shift that now people are looking much closer to home to look at the Asian region? How has that whole shift in the market been happening?
Well, I agree. Obviously, there has been a big shift, and especially in the money coming into Thailand and what they want to do. These American movies that came in 10 years ago, that Avi made or whoever, he was just using Thailand as a location, which is great, but they're making basically American films. I think now the focus is much more. First of all, Chinese money is actually the king of what people of co-production in Thailand right now. There are some funds like in Singapore and here and there, and Malaysians are putting some funds. But basically, if you want to make a big movie in Thailand, and you're not working for a Thai major, Sahamongkol or M Pictures, then you really should be looking at China. And Asian content in terms of distribution, it doesn't really work very well in the US. I mean, very little of it. If it's not Jackie Chan, you're really at risk. So you have to make sure that you have Asian content that you can recoup the money from Thailand and then recoup it again from China. Actually, that's really the model right now. So the shift has been very profound, actually. And there are still a lot of American and international co-productions coming to Thailand, but I think they're really just doing it to use Thailand as a location because the infrastructure is good and there are companies that can do it. And you have beautiful, unbelievable, wonderful locations, and you can put 200, 300 extras in there, and it's not going to cost you $10 million. It's going to be a reasonable price, and you can. The great thing about Thailand is the infrastructure works great, the communications, the transportation, but there's still a labor force, and there's still some things you can get at a real competitive price and competitive rate. So I would say the shift for me is mostly that the people that want to be involved in actually producing Thai films are coming from Asia, coming from China, coming from Malaysia, and some coming from Thailand too, obviously. But really, American films, they're coming here to use the infrastructure and things like that. They're not actually coming as a co-production where you're going to put Brad Pitt and you're going to put Mario or Ananda and hope to have a successful movie. That really doesn't work. So if they bring Brad Pitt, they're bringing Brad Pitt, and they're bringing all the Americans, and it's going to be a full-on American production, and it just uses Thailand as a location. So I don't know if I answered your question properly. Yeah. It got a little wacky there, but I think really if you want to produce movies in Thailand, China is an excellent place to start to look for funding and co-production.
Well, I want to pick up on that point because obviously you're quite right. There was this film, Bad Genius, which did over $40 million of business in China. And it really was, you said the same words, it opened the door. But tell me, the markets are very fickle. Things come. I remember when Asian horror was big in America. Trends come and trends go. How do we sustain this? How do we make sure that Thai films continue to have a market? And we don't just look back and say, oh, that was a nice flash in the pan.
Well, I have to say, I think these guys at GDH have done it again and again and again. I mean, they started with PMOC, and they've had at least 5 or 6 big hits in a row that have all gone internationally. What they've done is they've made kind of original films that are different but very entertaining and have such a great story. I think it's all about story and good movies, and if you have that, you can keep it going. So hopefully we'll have companies like that, and as Kun Kultep said, also he's trying to make something that's a little bit different from a lot of Thai productions, which is a lot of Thai productions are these rom-coms and things that don't really make a lot of sense to people that aren't Thai. Like this movie that came out recently with Bella, I watched. People were laughing all over the place. I had no idea why. So what GDH does is they make stories that actually people can understand from wherever you're from. It's not purely Thai. And so I think that's I mean, I actually just licensed from GDH the stage play rights to Bad Genius. So that's how far that story resonates. I think the way to keep it going is to keep having these really great stories made at a very high professional level. And obviously there's going to continue to be Thai product that's really just for Thai people. Like the Bella movie, Siam, I forgot the name. But to really reach out to the international, it's all about great stories. And that's what different companies are coming up with now, more and more.
Now, from a slightly different angle, Kultep, we're here today because of the Ministry of Culture. Now, obviously, film is a very important part of a living culture. Is there a danger that by trying to play to a world market, to attract international finance and co-production, that Thai film could lose its identity, lose what's special and Thai about it? Or doesn't that matter?
Oh, wow. What is being Thai, right? I mean, it's the beauty of culture is that it evolves. I like to use that word. I think, and that's what we see in Thai cinema now. I think the internationalization of content, right? Because now it's, if you go back and look at Thai content, which is very Thai, I think there will always be a market for that. Again, at the root of it, it's Thai culture, Thai humor, Thai sensibilities, and there will be those kind of movies, and they're great. Like Mark said, it's the movie that he mentioned is Iriam Singh, right? So it's yeah, there you go, that's the one. Yeah, and by the way, I mean I went to watch it too. And again, I didn't laugh at all the jokes. I understood all the jokes. I didn't laugh at it, and I can understand why people were laughing. Would I make a movie like that? Probably not in the immediate future. And not simply because, and it's a great movie. Don't get me wrong. It's a great movie. It made a lot of money. People were laughing, so there will always be those kind of movie, right? And to answer your question, does that lose the Thainess? I certainly don't think so, because and not only those kind of movie. If you look at it now, there's more regional films coming out. A lot of movies being made in the Northeast, all the Isan films that are coming out, and they're great, they're funny, it resonates with people, not only in the Northeast area of Thailand, but also in Bangkok, right? So I would say that those kind of content will always be there. But what is happening with let's say the OTT platforms coming in right now? You have filmmakers who are saying, all right, there's these content that is coming on Thai TV. There's these movies that are being made for Thailand. Now wait, the OTT platform, the consumption behavior of people who watch OTT platform might be a bit different, right? They might be the people who are watching Spanish shows, and people who are watching French shows, people who are watching American shows, and I think there is, and that market kind of goes beyond just Thailand, right? It's also like on the OTT platform. Then you have your Malays, and you have your Singaporeans and Taiwanese and all these people. So it gives you the canvas to then evolve and push Thai content to a larger international audience. And I think, to use the word culture, right? It's what is culture? And I think we were having a meeting at the Ministry of Culture a couple of months ago, and this very definition of the word culture came into play. And I think there was a very constructive discussion that happened in that room, and say, culture is not about what has happened. Culture is also about what you want people to perceive you in the future. And I think that would then translate to the content itself, right? I mean, you want to hold on to what has been good in the culture. Thailand is a very deep-rooted culture. Great, amazing things have happened. People are very proud of their culture, and I think that's great. But in storytelling, right, you also want to then take another step into what the culture is, and I think you grow together. And I think the beauty of cinema and content is that you're able to then take your story, tell it. You're able to take your culture and show it to the people outside. You're able to then move along with the society, the way it's changing and what is happening. And I think all that gets reflected in the content. And to me, I don't think, to answer your question, I don't think culture is something we should be afraid of. And I think it's a great mix. Sorry, if I may go back one step and answer when we talk about co-production, right? It's not just about the money, right? I think what is happening a lot with the co-production in Thailand is also the ability to work with foreign filmmakers, right? And then you share ideas, you share experiences, you share the way you tell stories. And I think, that's another beauty of it, right? Like, I know that GDH is, for example, right now working on a horror film that is being co-produced with Korea, right? So then you bring in those kind of flavors and sensibility into Thai content and Thai storytelling, which you're just able to tell it a bit differently. And I think that's where we can expect Thai cinema and Thai content to take the steps forward. And I think it's really exciting and beautiful.
So, Mark, now DVD, home video market, basically gone. Cinemas, who knows what the revenue stream will be from cinemas after COVID. Of course, everybody in Thailand, I remember when Netflix arrived and everybody had a project they wanted to send to Netflix. And then it turned out really they only wanted to speak to a very small number of major studios, and that perhaps the opportunities weren't as widespread as everybody hoped. It seems like the market has never been harder. How do you make it work nowadays? Oh, have we lost Mark's sound?
I'll unmute. There we go. Sorry about that. First of all, Netflix had at one point for a couple of years basically a monopoly, and they could do what they wanted. And that situation has cleared up a little bit because HBO Max is now coming in. Disney Plus will be here soon. Disney Plus came in Indonesia and became #1 within like 2 weeks. They and there will be unfortunately the local one went away. I forgot what it was called now even, but it went away a few months ago. But there is some OTT competition now. And if you have a good movie and a good story, you can sell it to Netflix. I mean, I made a movie 12 years ago in Thailand, a Thai movie called Chip Hai, and I sold it to Netflix 12 years later. So if the story is there and it's good, Netflix will still buy it. The getting them to actually co-produce and finance and do a pre-sale even or whatever, it becomes much more complicated because they have so many different conditions and they're very stringent, and they you know, then you really have to follow what they say and do it a certain way, and it costs a lot more money, and you don't creatively have the control that you need. Or that maybe you require, maybe need is the wrong word, but maybe that you want. So the two ways to do it: if you get in with Netflix, then you're working for Netflix. If you can find a way to finance first and then sell later, especially now with these new competitors coming in, I think it's a very attractive time to do that. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I do think that right now it's gonna. The boom is coming. You know, with HBO Max, they're already buying. Amazon just hired the old Netflix person in Singapore, so they're going to be very aggressive too. Amazon's coming in, and if there's 4 or 5 different OTT platforms that are all active and looking for a market share, then if you make a good program, you're going to find a home for it, and it'll be a home that actually pays a good. You know, a good license fee, and if you window things correctly, you can get on several platforms over several years and do quite well. I think the problem before was that it was only Netflix, and that situation is. But now Netflix has hired really some top people, and they're being very aggressive about getting into Thai content. They just hired the old head of GDH. And they hired Kun Chang. So there's some people there now that are dedicated to Thailand, and I think you'll see it start to change a little bit. But it's always going to be with Netflix. If you're producing for Netflix, then you know you've got all these rules, and it really does cost more, and you lose a lot of creative control. So the key, what I like to do is make them and then sell them afterwards. But obviously that's not possible for everybody, and it's not. Some people want to do it for Netflix, but I would say that that's kind of my read on it, is that with all the new OTT coming in, it's getting better and better, and Netflix is paying a decent money now. If you make a film, they'll buy the whole footprint of Southeast Asia. It's 28 territories, and they'll buy it for, you know, either if they take it as a Netflix exclusive, like a Netflix production, which they will do after the fact. Then it's a certain price, and then if they just take it to distribute it, it's another price and a much smaller window. So it's all give and take, and what you want to do with the program in the end. But Netflix and the competition is here, and I think the revenue is going to start to go up and up and up, and it already has. It's already been reflected in pricing from Netflix, and you can sell to HBO Max now.
So, Mark, while I've got you here, an I want an inside tip for you. What is the next thing? What is the thing that co-producers should be looking at? Is it action? Is it romantic? I know you're going to say it has to be good, and that's the most important thing, but what's the secret? Should we have big Chinese stars? Should we?
Well, no, you shouldn't. I'll tell you exactly if you want to know. Genre is still the best. So thriller, action, ghost movie, horror. The problem with ghost movies is that the Chinese censorship doesn't allow it. So you're going to lose China if you make it. You're going to lose China. That's not to say it won't do better in Malaysia. It won't do better in other areas. But a genre is still pretty strong. If you make a drama, you're gonna struggle. People don't like to watch drama in foreign languages. So action, superhero, fun, horror. These things haven't changed. That's people still want to have popcorn humor and forget about their lives for 2 hours and not have to think overly. And you know, you mentioned also that I forgot his name now, but the guy, my uncle Boonmi, he's making a different kind of movie, a kind of movie that I would never make. But those movies are also if you can make a really great art house movie, those can also be very, very good. But it has to be great and win Cannes or win Berlin. Then you can really do pretty well with an art house movie. But boy, that's a risk I wouldn't take. But I definitely think it. It's proven it can be done. He's won 2 Palme d'Ors, and both those movies have done very well financially. So there are different ways to go, but I would say genre is good.
Cool Tape. Same question to you. What are you looking at? What's your insider tip for co-productions in the future?
Yeah, I mean, my answer is very similar to Mark. I think those are the kind of content that works. We have a superhero project that we're working on at the moment. We have an action film that we are working on at the moment. We have a sort of a cross-culture Thai movie that we're doing, which is very interesting. It's set in Thailand, Thai movie, but we're just sprinkling the flavor of a different culture into it. I won't reveal too much right now. So yeah, I mean, there's this. Again, it has to be very specific. I think drama, again, it's very specific to the culture. Comedy, again, it's hard because comedy, I think, how people laugh in Thailand and how people laugh in Vietnam are different. Some might travel, but a lot of it could fall flat. So again, you really got to know your craft if you're going to venture into those. So I would say action still works well. Horror, of course, but again, horror it's harder by the day because there's so many of them out there that you really need to come up with a very original idea. It can be comedy horror, it can be like a horror, whatever you choose to do. But yeah, I think those kind of content, I think would be more widespread.
Brilliant. Well, look, this has been a very enlightening session for me. I'd like to thank you, Cool Tape, and thank you to Mark for joining us here. And of course, thank you to the Ministry of Culture for organizing this session today. And finally, thank you all for tuning in to watch us. I hope the next year we'll be with you in Cannes, but I've got an even better idea. Why don't you come and visit us here in Thailand? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.